I'm Charlotte Davenport. We're here at Lebanon, New Hampshire at AVA Gallery, 11 Bank Street, at a wonderful show. And Kathy Cohn is one of the artists in this show. And you live in
East Topsom, Vermont.
East Topsom, Vermont. So we have a Vermont artist showing here. For how many weeks is this showing?
I believe it's about 3 weeks. Yeah.
So for about 3 weeks, this is May 30th, I think. So we hope you get over here and see this work for yourselves. And let's just take a walk around and look at things. Can we start with this one? And then often what I do, Kathy, is that you could be even here and she gets you talking. And then I stand behind her so that when you're talking, you're then talking to the people,
Okay.
not me. Oh, this is an interesting piece. I see that it's mixed media, and I was curious about the media and maybe the significance for you of this work.
This piece is actually created by scanning my palm, and it's printed with an iris printer, which is an older technology now. And the idea for me in this piece, using the dot as like a mantra or an awareness practice, and it was a way to sort of be in the painting, and the painting really, paradoxically, it's not finished until the last dot is put on. So, and it's also essentially a way of reading, one's own map, the map that, sort of that micro macro kind of thing in one's palm, and so it was a nice, for me, a way to be in it and not be in it at the same time. That same kind of
by
way.
having this scale, it becomes something like your own landscape.
Yeah.
It has a tradition, really, on first glance of landscape, or something. As you said, you're looking at the small, but up on the large level. Mm-hmm. And when you scan, for example, these shaded areas along the lines, is that part of the natural light in the hand?
Yes.
It's not changed like with Photoshop or something.
Right. No, there's no Photoshop in it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Where did you get the idea?
I'm always scanning things. Scanning is a way for me to have a camera. I'm not a photographer, but I find that the translation with a scanner is really interesting, and I like how it illuminates things in ways that I wouldn't necessarily do with the camera.
It's an examination almost.
Yeah.
And of course, you've had in Cone Press the first iris printer, which many artists locally, and probably best known was Sabre Field. Is she still producing work?
Sabre still
at
works
your print?
with us doing iris prints and clays, and our iris printer is one of the only ones going. So.
And it sounds funny. Think of it as an old technology. When it first came out, we were so excited that things could look so wonderful. But you're using it as an actual medium in your work, which I think is exciting. Not just reproducing, but letting it be the tool. That's a wonderful aspect. I'm glad you have it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful machine because it's really one of the only printers right now that it's water soluble. So you can access it again. You can, open it up with water. So it's an amazing tool.
Well, there's another one in similar vein that I'd like to move to where the palette seems to change. So let's take a look at that. This is called Palm Series 2. And it's a similar process, clearly, but a very different effect in the end. These really warm dots now, and less, a more complicated palette. So how did you, how are these added?
They're added with the end of a paintbrush.
And it's acrylic? Or?
It's acrylic, And for me, it's really about, it takes on a quality of quietness and stillness. And again, it's one thing to be in it working and then stepping out of it. There's this whole other sort of phenomena that happens that is inherent in the map itself as one is reading, and it's something that's sort of revealed again, the sort of translation of using the scanner and then reading the hand as a map.
When you began, were you literally just looking at your hand and thought, ah?
Yeah.
Huh.
Attracted to the lines, and I love, I'm always looking at line in nature. Like this also could very well
Let's
be a
put
leaf.
your hand out and have your hand so you can see this hand with the beautiful lines that even my own hand, I'm now looking at it and thinking, oh, it's so much more interesting than I thought. And it's not like palm reading, it's really about your own essence to just be attentive and conscious of.
I guess it's
These
another way
places.
of DNA.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Fingerprints. There you
It
go.
is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, these are very beautiful. The one in between is highly textured and quite different, and reminded me of Aboriginal work of Australia and New Zealand when they had these paths and lines, and often accompanied by these kinds of dots. But I know that yours is called Host, and that it's acrylic, and it did not involve the iris printer. Do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, this is a painting that line sort of evolves in an organic way. Again, it becomes a way of reading a map, and it's a way. There's an intimacy with it, like on another level. That once I've established this map, in this organic way, this sort of remembrance of something that I'm working towards, then it's another way of reading that. And so it's sort of like being able to have a dialogue with one's own work or conversation.
I like how you work big. It'd be a lot different if it was a smaller canvas.
Yeah, I think there's something that happens with the dot when it's a larger size, or with anything, just the scale will change.
It has the same patience, this very small work, and yet it keeps growing into a large canvas, which is very interesting. This has a wonderful palette. I love the way the blues kind of sneak in on the edges. And again, it has a sense of almost like you're looking in at another planet or something. Very mysterious.
But I think I really strive for, on one level, to work with qualities in a subtle way with work. And so when you said the word patience, that's definitely one of the qualities that come into mind. And there are many to work on, but I think having a quality come through work for me is an interesting investigation.
Well, even walking with you, I feel very calm and quiet and not inclined to chatter as much as I often do. So this work does have that impact on the viewer as well as the artist. That the person looking at the work becomes rather still, and in order to really see it, you have to let your eyes move around and be still. So people must come see this work. This wall is similar sort of canvases, very different pieces, but same technique on canvas with acrylic. And the first one is called Gill, is it? Goo. And what's this one? Samad. What are the meanings of the titles?
Well, gu is a Persian word for rose, or the heart. And samad is one way of the inner hearing, the inner sound that's sort of infinite. And in that quietness, I think, getting back to working with qualities, that it's in that this is a nonverbal medium, obviously. We're working in this way, and because of that, it has that sound of silence. And I think we can see throughout with all the artists here that there is this beautiful sound that comes through the work that is mysterious in that way.
Yes, and I think it's interesting you're using Persian words. Do you read Persian poetry?
I do. I love Persian poetry. I am a student of Sufism, and I've been studying meditation for a long time. Hafiz and Rumi are two of my favorite
poets.
Two of my favorite poets.
Well, and also this concept of the Persian imagery, because these Persian miniatures, which are very, very small, have this sort of meditative detail, even when they are narrative. They are always interesting in their small elements, in the way they sort of square line and very small amounts of spatial definition. And these, what appear to be almost decorative looping, which becomes much more journey than a decoration. But yeah, just exquisite. Love this paragraph. Well, there's another painting that we looked at on the way in, so we could take a look. Sure. This is the first painting I saw when I came into the gallery, and I was very drawn to it. And at first, it felt as if it had a light, and because it's beside a window, I identified it almost as a window into some other light, in the way that a stained glass window is, because the palette is so rich and has this luminosity. And the background in the, this is just paper, but it looks like silk, the way you've represented that background through the paper. And you told me that the line is the theme of this. Do you want to describe that again?
Yeah. Well, again, this is sort of the paintings that we just saw before this. This is sort of a precursor in that it's a study with line and the idea of remembrance. And on some level, it's like the scaffolding that the dot goes on.
Oh, yes.
And on another level, getting back to that we were talking, this idea of line as an invisible thread, and it arranges itself after some point in the process, just like a constellation. It's suddenly, here it is, and it's sort of that covering and remembering, covering and bringing back up, till it's that place where it has that moment of silence, I guess, or stillness. So.
Well, this is a very, very special piece of art because, again, even though we have this bright red, which is usually full of energy and a sort of excitement, even with the red, we can sort of travel these wonderful curvaceous loops and paths. And it reminds me of a poem by William Stafford, which begins, "There's a line that you follow that will always be there," and it ends, the last line is, "You must never let go of the thread." And I can feel that sense of the personal journey with the line. It's beautiful. It also, when you said it's a scaffolding for the other, it reveals for me something about the other work that you were talking about. Did you get lost when you're doing the dots? Because this is the gesture and then the detail. It's part of all painting. Well, of these three drawings we're going to look at, this one, which is called Hook, seems most related to the others, and it is a iris print.
And in this one, it's a painting that I used as a plate to scan, and then it became the print. It became a monoprint, and then the plate was destroyed. So again, the scanner is a way of printmaking that I've used, and being able to think of plates in a different way.
So how large was it, the piece that you scanned?
It's exactly that size.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
Because you've got that conception already in mind.
Yeah.
Well, I like the verticality of it too. It becomes a bit of an object, by just that form. Very interesting. Nice layers again.
And I've always been interested in the idea of like a finished piece becoming the beginning, like, in Tai Chi where the form is it's that repetition of beginning and ending, the state of,
Very
stillness and movement back to stillness. And so I like to play around with this.
Yeah,
these
very interesting.
concepts.
Well, I've seen sand paintings by Buddhist monks and things, and they are done in such tiny little elements, and then they're gone.
Yes.
So that happened here. The actual work, which took you so long, is gone, but this is here, the ghost of it, which becomes meaningful. Well, this is really tying into a very special way of working as a meditating Sufi and poet reader.
Yes.
And these two small ones are really not, are they scanned? No, they're ink.
One's an ink drawing, and then one is, the other one is a drawing that I scanned and printed and then painted on top of.
Now, do you ever teach, or do you work always by yourself?
I do teach sometimes, and I also have workshops where I'm actually not teaching, but it's a gathering, a group of people who come. And we share our work together and have a week of conversation, and they're poets and writers and artists. And
Because you've worked with the press, you have this contact in the wider culture community.
yeah.
Now, are those workshops open, or are these people that you're already working with through the press?
They're
usually?
open, yeah.
They're open?
Yeah.
Oh, well, people can they go online and look at your website?
They could go on, they could actually email me.
Want to tell that email?
Yeah, Cat Cone, CATCONE @AOL.com, and I'd be happy to share
Oh,
that
that's so
information.
good to know.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Well, I'm interested, and I have friends who might be.
Yeah.
And they'll be going on this summer?
Yes, yeah, actually, we're going to have one in September, so.
Oh, good. Oh, this has been great fun
Thank
talking
you so
with you.
much.
I'm Charlotte Davenport. I'm here at 11 Bank Street, AVA Gallery in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and I'm with Carlene Zumbalati. Did I say that right?
That's correct.
And she has some wonderful paintings here today for us to look at and have a little conversation about. And I have never seen your work before, and I'm delighted to be here, so I'll be asking out of the blue questions.
Okay. Hopefully I can.
How long have you actually been working in Vermont?
I lived in Vermont for 20 years.
So you've been here.
I moved up here from New York, and before that I lived in England, London,
Oh, interesting.
and Philadelphia.
And you showed in England too.
I have. Yes.
How exciting. Well, tell us a bit about your present way of working and what your...
This particular show is kind of a takeoff from the earlier work. It's all linear. It's been linear for, I don't know, maybe 10 years now. And the work, this particular work is an investigation of interlocking patterns, and to also the way that patterns can repeat themselves, sort of like quilt design or tessellation designs, and the repetitive patterns that they create.
But not predictable, because I've been looking at that, which I like. Or is it... Is it a
play
system?
There's a system, definitely a structural there's an understructure in all of this particular work, and then the patterns, I sort of subliminate them with the linear, repetitive filling in, if you might say, of the patterns.
So it becomes like a very vigorous grid with the color and line.
They're not really all on the grid. Some are more about the grid. That's what became the precursor for the work, is that in one drawing that's in the show and the other side of the room is called In Time Like Air. And I've done a lot of multiple panels where I'll put a lot of multiple panels of paper on the wall and do a very organic kind of sinuous line that drawing that would just fill the whole page. You have a structure, and that particular piece has 2 circles. That's a structural element that's there that kind of disappears. And in this one, it's all fish, and you don't see the fish.
Oh,
and I have, there's birds in some, and butterflies in other ones, and I've been playing with the designs and things that are under structures and the pieces, and they disappear.
Oh, that's a wonderful
And
one.
before I didn't do that, it was just a random line that kind of just, was an all-over painting, and then I would begin to map, as I call it, touch. It's very important to touch, and touching each space, like over and over again, every little piece of it, so that it brings me, while I paint, to a state of reverie. It's a very meditative process, but also as a viewer, I think it also brings someone to, as if you're standing in front of the ocean viewing, you become it sends you into an inner state of being. And that, I really enjoy that state when I look at a piece. And I also, color interaction is really important as well. Painting a background might take, 4 to 6 hours straight work, no stopping, because if you stop, then the brush marks. And I don't have any plans, like I can't say, well, I have 3 hours right now, I'm going to paint this. It's more like I have to have a whole entire day, because I don't know when it'll be right, and I have to keep going and going and going until it's right, and just not give up.
And your surface has to have this quality of that same time.
That's the line that's on top, that can take a series of months to paint. But the background,
The surface.
Yeah, the background is something that I'll spend, maybe, I think the most it's ever taken was about 6 hours. Where one, if it's oil, I can play with it a little bit longer. I can.
But with acrylic, you really just have to.
Acrylic, the smaller paintings are acrylic, and the big paintings are oil.
And for people who are looking at this is one. It's beautiful. I love the way this is floating out of the.
Floating.
And it's on a piece of wood.
Yes, this particular one is on birch wood, a birch panel, which is sanded and gessoed about 4 times. So.
Well, it's a painting people should come to the gallery and take a look at it and see. It's
This one's called Aerial Dream, and my titles have a lot of meaning for me. I guess that part of my interests are that, and my titles I'm hoping that it would provoke somebody into the thought of maybe, how I think about the work. And with dreams, sort of like you think of the unconscious. And so that's a state of reverie that might conjure up in you or somebody else something totally different, because the lines, even though for me I have patterns and structures going on underneath the work, it doesn't mean that that's what you will see. So I feel like there's something subliminal going on for me.
where people experience it from their own state of being.
Yes, and that's why this one's called Aerial Dream, so it's about the air and that lift of transcendence, or experience an ascension of some sort. And hopefully, I don't know, I'm assuming that the color is doing that, and I also think a lot about the landscape and the way that the sun rises or sets. The way, the landscape for living in Vermont's really important to me. Just from right now, the work is, I have a lot of thought about the landscape and the way the mountains and the sky and the sun rising and setting. That's very apparent in the work for me this time around. I mean, before I was very interested in the way that nature multiplied itself in sheer quantity, and how those patterns would repeat themselves over and over again in a formation of some sort. And I addressed that in my earlier work. And this work I'm trying to push a little bit further in the sense that the patterns were already there, and when I did the painting or drawing of In Time Like Air, the actual grid of the paper got in the way, and then it made me think, well, reacting to that, what if I now keep doing the panels, but I do one drawing and then I multiply it? So then I started looking at quilt design.
Now, is that drawing here?
Yes.
Let's take a look at that now.
Okay. So this piece, as I said before, I drew out 2 circles, and then that became my structure. And then the work would begin by a random line that was very gestural, and would just, just fill all over the whole entire piece. And when I did this, I felt that the grid of the actual paper got in the way of the piece because I was.
See, there are seams here. that
Yes.
Viewers can't see.
And
You were very aware of
and
this.
that is what became the precursor to this particular body of work that I've been doing. And just so even though I don't have a grid in all of the pieces, they are repeating themselves. The design repeats itself in different ways, and that was what I was investigating. The smaller work, trying out and experimenting before I would do a bigger piece. And then I wanted to really push that whole grid idea, and that's what made me make the modular piece. And that one's called Shift.
Now, this one, these forms feel almost flower-like as they come out, but they come from a circular form to begin with each one. And this is circular.
It's basically a very random line, like the outside line.
Just like
that's
this, that keeps
all
moving.
over inside the circles, and then I begin to fill them in.
And they just become more and more dense as you follow those lines.
Yes, yes. I mean,
So
I could have kept going and, gone all the way to the whole edge, but I decided not to. And
Well, leaving this hint as to how it starts is beautiful.
that's
in terms
what
of following the
yes,
direction.
that's what I like.
Now, because this is on paper, it's called a drawing. And, I didn't really think about
It's
that because of its
work on
size.
paper, I guess.
But it's very painterly in a sense because it's
Well, the gestural
well,
line
and the
is
whole
very,
composition is
yes.
completing this space as an object set inside together is nice.
That's a floater frame.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, look. Okay.
Well, now that I've talked with you, I love looking at how this meandering, wonderful line is taking place. And even though it's a line, I think there's a gesture that says you're a painter, and yet we're calling this a drawing. And I just like to know when you feel it's drawing and when you feel it's painting, because the last one was basically the ground itself had become a painting, almost like an outdoors color study, and then on top of it became the line.
Right.
So you move back and forth between those.
I do. And also between sculpture and painting.
And
I don't have any sculptures in this particular show,
But you
but there
look
is
at-
an edge to the work that I do with sculpture because it's two-dimensional.
Yes.
And that when does it become painting an object?
Yeah.
And so I've had a lot of controversy over it, people complaining, saying that's not a painting, I think of them as paintings, but other people don't, so I started calling them sculptures. And this, for me, even though I'm using a Sharpie, it's very graphic. And I think that for me, right there, keeps it in the realm of drawing.
Of drawing.
Even though, it was a
So
last
the materials
minute.
and the way you're working.
Yeah, with paper and the way that I'm working. It was a last minute decision to put the yellow on. That was not planned. It didn't feel finished, and I feel like when something doesn't feel finished, you have to keep going until it does, whether you destroy it or not. You just have to do it, otherwise it doesn't resonate.
Well, it has a wonderful impact as you walk into this gallery for this show. It's very, very visible
Yes.
from a long distance, and it's a wonderful piece. Let's work on, look at this next piece. Now, would you consider this a drawing or an installation?
Not a drawing. It's a print of the drawing. That my drawing was a 4-inch by 4-inch square that I scanned into a computer.
Oh.
And this is printed. It's a thermographic print, and which means that once it's printed on the paper, your choice. You then put it through a heat process so the ink rises. So it's actually just lifted off the surface.
Slightly
A
intaglio.
texture.
Yeah.
And it's really a print, and it is an installation because it has to be installed every time I make it. This particular piece was very process oriented, and I think even the way, I mean, normally I would approach something like this where I would repeat the drawing over and over again. There are 500 cards, and I think I didn't use all 500, but I mounted them all on a 12-inch by 12-inch panel and then put the piece together. And the idea was to shift each drawing, each little tile, as you might say. This was because the work I started investigating a lot more of tile and quilt makers, and they usually work with little squares, and so that was the idea. And a lot of the smaller paintings are all based on a square, and I would make templates and try to arrange them in particular ways.
And what is this material? I love the surface because when you walk in the room, it appears almost like tile.
It's card paper. Yes, it does.
It has a wonderful sheen though in this.
That was what I wanted, was a high gloss card, and then to do a glossy black line. I thought of doing a glossy green line. I have another one that I'm working on now that I'm going to probably do in color. And I'm not sure if I'll do the thermographic printing or not, but I thought that the thermographic printing worked very well for this particular piece.
Now, are you able to do that with equipment you have?
No, I hired somebody to print it for me.
Well, let's move on to the drawing you just spoke about.
I do a lot of 10-inch by 10-inch, I call them paintings. And, these are studies, basically. All the pieces that I do, they're precursors for a larger piece. I'm playing around with colors and lines and shapes and patterns and trying to figure out what I want to do on a larger panel. And then there's a few that I might really like, and then I'll develop those further. And this is a really good example of the pattern repeating in a tile formation. And I guess these are called primary cells. So when a quilt designer would make one cell, and then they would repeat that cell, and they might change the colors of it, but the actual shape or whatever, that cell would stay and it would multiply. And so these were primary cell studies. And this one, I guess I do 09, which is the year 2009, and then this was my 4th study that I did for this series. And each time it just changes because I'm just trying to play, I'm experimenting, and with everything between color and the way things will develop. And this one I thought was the most quilt-like.
It is quilt-like, yeah.
And each design this would be one cell that would repeated itself, I believe, 9 times in this particular piece. Where I have a couple of other smaller paintings where it doesn't repeat itself. It's just that one unit like that. And I think that these are a really the piece that we just looked at, the all white piece with the black, the thermographic print. This is a really good example of what I'm trying to do in that piece. And in that piece, I feel like, because it's so minimal, that it's like a prayer. It's very meditative. Everything that I try to do in my work, I feel like actually was answered or presented in that piece. I feel like it just came through, but it was a very understated way without a lot of struggle or other stuff that I'm putting in the pieces.
And what are the materials in this series?
These are usually acrylic. Is the background, the paint,
Yeah.
and then on paper, and the line on top in this series is Sharpie. And I've used gel pens. I try to work quick. I just need, because my work is very labor intensive, I'm trying to look for methods of working that I can work through ideas very quickly. And this is just happens to be a really good medium for me to work in.
Carlene, this is fascinating because I see a connection, but I also see the departure, and I love it. I love the openness that the square is gone, but it's still suggested.
It's still suggestive.
And it still feels like 9 forms.
Yes.
And it's a very new palette from the one we just looked at.
Yes.
What got you working in this way?
And with the new
With
palette?
and with the
or
openness.
With the new palette?
Yes, and the openness of the forms.
Well, part of me, I like to push color. I mean, and because there's a very strong figure-ground relationship in all of my work, be it from the line to the ground of the background. Sometimes I like to push the color so much that that it will, be almost like an op art kind of edge to the work.
Without making us dizzy, like the
Without
stuff I
making
did
you
not
dizzy.
like.
I'm not, I don't see my work as being op art, but there is elements of op
Yes.
art that is there in the work. And I like to push the color. And also I was working, this is fluorescent actually, paint, and I've been working with the blended or bleeding palette, the rainbow palette
Yes.
that, printmakers use a lot, that rainbow roll. And I have been using that a lot. In this particular series, I've never done that before. Usually my colors were random like the line, just, mushing it around until I got variations of color.
Well, it's interesting because we mentioned op art, and op art often had a kind of nervous energy, but yours do not.
No.
And you mentioned the meditative quality, and it really is true in your work. If you stand and just look, the mind kind of calms down as we appreciate what's going on in your imagination.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the reasons why the work needs to be very large. It works really well large, and it works really well small, because there's an intimacy that goes on that allows for you to kind of conjures you or the viewer into that state of reverie. And I think it works very well small. I've had a very difficult time doing a middle ground painting, although in this show I have 2 that I feel that are successful. And they always felt like something was missing, that they just didn't quite work. And I think that the frames really helped them to hold together. And
Carly, you mentioned earlier that your titles are meaningful and suggest something very unique about this body of work and the paintings of this.
yes.
Want to describe that, please?
Yes, in the 5 larger pieces, the titles all are about air, which is about movement, and I think of air as being the source of imagination. It's also a symbol for the unconscious, or a state of reverie, transcendence, and it also goes with me looking at the sky and the land and the mixture of that combination of the sun rising and setting. And but it's all in reference to the movement of the imagination, basically, which to me is the whole point of the state of reverie. And so the titles, this one's called the Butterfly Effect, which and this one's Oneric Flight. Oneric means to dream. And the earlier piece is called In Time Like Air. So it's all suggests you can't see air, but you can feel it. And it's the same thing with the imagination, or it's sort of like you can feel it, and within you it's there, but you might not be able to actually visually, optically see it.
This is a wonderful show. I hope people come and experience the sort of atmosphere that you brought into the gallery space. And I'm, for one, very grateful to have seen your work, and thank you very much for coming. Mallory. I live in Bank Street, living in New Hampshire. Happy to be here with Sue Sunny Park, who's created the most delightful space. And also, for me, a bit of a puzzle, which I love. It feels like a puzzle, too. You can go in and out of this work, which you'll see shortly. You'll begin to understand that this is a space that you can go in and out of, like small rooms.
Yeah, but I think for me, it's one of those odd things. I mean, I work as an installation artist, but I think this is a piece more of object-based, more sculptural. You can walk around rather than weave through the space underneath it, perhaps, because it's not quite. You can still see the gallery walls and space in terms of. So, and a lot of it is attached to the wall. There's some floating ones. So there's the element of kind of Donald Judd, and also, get it on the wall, and also kind of a little bit of kind of conventional, traditional sculpture in terms of in round. You could go walk around. So there's that two components or that thing going on.
Let's describe the materials a little bit, because
Yeah.
people seeing this on a video don't quite have a sense of the lightness of it. And you've worked with this material before, I'm sure.
I work with all kinds of material. I think that for me, it's one of those, I make work hard for myself in terms of a lot of stuff. I try to figure out a way to kind of fill the space. So foam and anything that allows a volumetric, so I use these foams, and I've seen this. Pink is, I don't really use color in my work, but this I can't avoid. I just like the kind of the hexagonal kind of multiplication that I could do with the honeycomb, or kind of a little bit of.
Now, were these forms something that contained something? I'm not sure.
They have utilitarian function, so it's a product. So it's raft are made. The raft is the filler for the raft in the ceilings, and so to avoid the air from coming in, or to insulate. It's insulation material, I guess you could say. And then this
material,
aluminum honeycomb, is used for a lot of different things. It's because it's honeycomb, when you press it this way, it has a lot of structure. So they use it for the ventilations to countertops, to walls, and airplane crafts, because it's light. Again, it's expanded so that it has a volume, but the strength of it is strong. So I used that to wanted to create walls for some of the areas, because someone said it's so light of a material, but just to see it from the side with the rigidness and a little bit of angularity, it gives as though it has kind of a mass or weight to it.
Yes.
Or it has its but I wanted to kind of make that more of solid kind of feeling by putting the aluminum.
It also works with the coloration of
shadows.
shadows. This work on the wall, so the wall, I'm sure, is painted in conjunction as you assemble these parts.
Yeah, I went to an art school, so there's a lot of that kind of the design principles and the elements, the way that if you work with a color, then even though you put the most neutral color, it makes it as though it's complementary color, so it feels like it's green.
Yes, it does.
And then
particularly when you look at the darker.
Yeah, so I did add greenish gray to the wall paint colors. But just looking at the form, it has that green, so I wanted to kind of mimic that back in there as the shadow color.
And in a sense, it does have a back, although it's a sculptural piece. Looking around it requires, again, some going in and out, I think. It's like being in here, and you do get a whole different sense, like looking at you through this little hole. And coming right up to the surface of this material. It's a material that we're all familiar with egg cartons and other things.
Yeah.
but I've never seen it made into a wonderful installation.
Yeah,
So-
I like the idea of also having something feels as though it has a structure and
Mhm.
rigidness, or maybe, I mean, we know it's foam, but also feels opposite to that in some way because of the
Mhm.
angularity, rigidness, and then, but I wanted to have it sit off the ground. So I do a lot of kind of hanging pieces, but I didn't want it to do the hanging also, you know, as a person trying to work in three-dimensional, you can't avoid the gravity. So if I was trying to hang this, it would rip through, and also, you know, it'll sag. So wanted to create something that allows it to. So I mean, I created this wooden legs for them.
I love the contrast of the wood with it.
Yeah, and I
actually.
knew the floor was wood, so I wanted to. I mean, they're not same tone in terms of same stained wood as the floor, but I think it works with the rectilinear that's happening. It's okay with the hexagonal, I think.
And it's probably why I see it as places to go in and out of, because it's almost like little doors. I'm too big to get in.
Yeah, it was a lot more. I mean, as I build in it, Adam, the educational director, have said something interesting, because I spend a lot of time in the space installing. Some of these were created unit, but a lot of it was added as I'm doing it, and maybe some more. So that whole having trained in the art school compositional elements that I played, so like when I get some, I sit back and then add more and more and more. So Adam said, you know, it's almost like you work like drawing in space.
Yes,
And
creating within this room.
yeah, and it's like I don't really know quite how it's gonna all look like until I
Begin to
install
put
it in the space and I kind of have a dialogue while I'm doing it, you know.
Well, it's very effective, and I love how this sort of separate cluster
Yeah.
gives you an opportunity to see the structure of each sort of unit. You can really look in and see how the wood goes up and how beautifully it's constructed and designed.
And also
at
the-
times this hanging, it does almost feel like it's floating. When the piece comes down as low as that, I love that. And also using these entry points as almost like a lens, looking through, changing perspective. If you move your head up and down, it's kaleidoscopic even.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
beautiful. Very geometric kind of
Yeah.
central.
Yeah, and I think I've always been fascinated with this, like, when we use the term something is organic or describe something as organic and something as a man-made or geometric, but in nature everything is, if you break it down to microscopic, it is all geometric, or it has that kind of system in the growth. So I like that kind of dichotomy. And so much as I'm using the synthetic man-made thing, it's not even biodegradable, but somehow go
It's
back
related to a
honeycomb
principle
and
that's deep.
other things, yeah. Or,
And unpredictable, which I like. I
yeah.
think that there's something sometimes when people get into structures within an architectural space,
Yeah.
it can become a bit symmetrical or something, and you can kind of predict the next unit. I could never predict the next unit. Each one has its own growth.
Yeah, I think it would be very different if I re-show this piece, I mean, of course, but this gallery is really interesting because it's a trapezoidal shape, and I wanted
Yes.
to kind of play with that. So as you walk in here, if you're not looking at that, it's very horizontal line this way. And as you walk and stand on this side, it flattens it out. But I think the dynamic that I think was kind of interesting is diagonal instead of being, you know, I mean, it's perpendicular to that wall, but overall, and walking in this space, you know, it's creating more of the diagonal direction.
It has a three-dimensional integrity as
Yeah.
a whole unit.
I mean,
It
I
does.
keep thinking about artists like, you know, I'm a big fan of minimalists, post-minimalists and stuff, but also, you know, installation artists like Judy Feff, you know,
Oh,
she's
yeah.
somehow with this big pictorial painting space, and she just brought that out, and we were inside of a painting, kind of. But the way she works is very spontaneous too, and she just brings in a lot of elements, and she
And
just
creates, as she would
yeah.
if she were working
Yeah.
on a smaller piece.
It's just a lot of preparation and, before I come in, I make small units because of the limited space, but in my studio, just making a lot of units and units and units and gluing, and then make smaller of a cluster, but the actual large cluster has to be created here because of space limitation. And
It's almost like a bee.
yeah.
These cells are very like that, very busy.
busy.
Difficult to get the elements and then decide how they best express themselves in this space.
And for
Let's
me-
walk through this gateway, and I think of it as a gateway because it enters into the whole of this room again. So the piece does create a way, why don't you go that way and I'll go this way, just so people get an idea of the scale. That this is a space where at an opening or when people are here, probably less of an opportunity to see this whole thing by yourself. So people seeing this video, they should come now that the opening is over. It's not crowded, it's a wonderful room to walk around in and see how you feel about this beautiful installation.
Yeah.
One more question about the painting.
Yeah.
So is this done, do you use stencils or you must use?
I actually have a stencil that I trace around, and each piece was hand painted.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, hand painted. So, but someone said, well, why didn't you paint the walls and then put the piece in it? But again, a lot of it was put together in space. So there's this, when I had to paint the wall, I had to crawl underneath it.
To
and
get
do
in
a little bit
the,
of
it's a good
acrobat.
thing you're middle.
Acrobat to paint it. So I'm coming from a painting background, and I realized I used to wait tables as a student in college. And I realized the kind of the habits that I had, which was drinking coffee after work. I wait a table and come home, drink coffee so I could stay up a little bit longer, and then paint in my basement where I had a painting studio. And for me, and one day I came back from work and I saw these coffee cups left the night before and how each stain was different. And that made me realize something that I thought that was mundane and same was all different. And I realized my effort or my desire to be an artist, that itself is the art, not the illusion that I create on canvas. It's not about the pushing the brush against the canvas, but it's that kind of wanting to find a significance in something very ordinary or mundane, or find some sort of, significance in kind of everyday and make it special. So that's where I moved away from painting for me, and then try to work with or cope with the physicalness or the being existing as a three-dimensional being, and try to, so because painting to me was like this other space. It's a window into this illusion, and it's almost like having a dream or fantasy versus when you're trying to create an artwork that is three-dimensional, then you are in some way, I talk about gravity and, moisture, sunlight, and those things I am up against and have to kind of work with it, not win
In
over
reality
it, but
rather than illusion.
yeah.
That's a very interesting
So
point.
that's how I moved away from painting. And also my choice of materials. When I was in grad school, I came to this article. It's about to collect and to be collected, and this whole desire of artists wanting to, of course, we all want to survive and make a living as an artist. But when the things are being collected, they don't want to collect something that they already have, so which creates this kind of artists always, this notion of avant-garde and how the old work still exists. So it's kind of creating a traffic jam in some way. So I told myself that I'm going to create work that it goes in and it has to come out, and it's kind of a challenging. It's my desire is not to be collected. I mean, look at this stuff. Like, if someone wants to collect this, it's like it's a lot of challenge for them too.
Yes.
So my desire is never an object, even though I do make three-dimensional object. But it's not about. I'm kind of trying to let go of object in some way to use the material that are somewhat flimsy, or it doesn't. The foam itself is not biodegradable, but the structuralness of this rigidness, it will start to get wobbly and lose that. So I use materials like paper and things like that, all along with welding metal structure for it. But it's, so the whole idea of gets trashed.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's no, and have to make new room for new things, or this space doesn't get jammed, or make room for the next artist in my own way that I conceptualized, or I believe in that. So I don't make stuff that are collectible.
It's a
necessarily.
transforming attitude, and you can see it in this space. So
Yeah.
it's a good thing. She is here, and you're on the faculty at Dartmouth, right?
Yeah.
I want to mention that people can, because I know you've
Yeah.
recently had a show, and sometimes you have lectures, and I just want people to know you're here,
Yeah.
that you're part of the community, and that was really important in this show.
AVA bring in a lot of artists from out of town too, but I think that they try to support the local. And the thing about Bente, for her to have this space and how much it has grown, I mean, as a artist in town, local, we all try to support, and it's a great opportunity, great space. And also, when I moved here, my colleague have told me that it's very important we show locally.
Yes.
A lot of us are from outside coming here because of the job at Dartmouth, so we have our venue showing elsewhere, and this more like a working space and living space. But
And I'm
to
personally
share-
very grateful, because I've
Yeah.
worked here as an artist for over 40 years.
Yeah.
And this whole environment has enriched my life like no one can imagine how important it has been.
Yeah.
So I think those are important
I mean, I
points.
think it's also very impressive and amazing to be here and live here and realize the artists that are here. We choose to be in this environment, be inspired by, the space that we have, and less of a hustle bustle in terms of competitions. It's much more, you do it at your will and for your desire, but how serious of a artist, the group that exists here are very impressive and just very nurturing. I really enjoy being
I'm
here.
glad you're here
And more
joining
and more
all that.
constant
Yeah.
meeting,
Yeah.
you and, I know Adam was an artist too, and just, everybody's an artist.
The people here at AVA, I think, are exceptional in that every one of them is really, in their way, a very, very creative person. And some of them are not able to create their art right now,
Right,
but they are all,
yeah,
Very
for the
serious
creativity
artists.
and- Yeah.
and it makes them sensitive to things like this wonderful exhibition. Well, I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And everybody come to AVA, see this beautiful show, enjoy Sunny's great effort and beautiful piece. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.